Isaac loved his wife, Rebekah, very much. For many long years they hoped and prayed for children, but their home remained quiet. This infertility was a source of sadness for them both. Isaac, a man of faith, prayed earnestly to God, asking for Rebekah to conceive. They waited for 20 years, a significant period that surely tested their patience and their trust in God's plan. Their desire for a family was strong, and they held on to the hope that God would eventually answer their heartfelt pleas. This period of waiting was a defining chapter in their early married life, shaping their reliance on divine providence. God, in His time, heard Isaac's prayers and Rebekah conceived. Their initial joy, however, was soon mixed with concern. The pregnancy was unusually difficult as Rebekah felt a violent struggle within her womb. It was as if the babies were fighting even before they were born. This turmoil deeply troubled Rebekah, and she sought understanding from God about what this internal conflict could possibly mean for her and for her future children. God provided her with a profound and somewhat ominous prophecy. He revealed to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." This divine message foretold a future of division and hierarchy between her offspring. When the time came for the twins to be born, the prophecy began to unfold. The first baby to emerge was named Esau. He was distinctive from birth, with a red complexion and his entire body covered in hair, like a hairy garment. Shortly after Esau, his brother was born. This second twin came out grasping Esau's heel, a symbolic act that led to his name, Jacob. The name Jacob can mean he grasps the heel, but it also carries the connotation of he supplants or he deceives. Isaac was 60 years old when these two very different sons were born, bringing both joy and the weight of prophecy into their household. As Esau and Jacob grew from infants into young men, their personalities and life paths diverged significantly. Esau developed into a skillful hunter, a man who thrived in the open country and loved the thrill of the chase. He was robust and connected to the wild. Jacob, in contrast, was a quieter individual, content to stay at home, perhaps among the tents, engaging in more domestic or pastoral pursuits. This difference in their natures also led to differing parental affections. Isaac favored Esau, largely because he enjoyed the savory game that Esau would bring him. Rebekah, on the other hand, felt a stronger connection to Jacob, her more thoughtful and homebound son. These preferences would unfortunately sow seeds of discord. Esau's character was marked by impulsiveness, a trait that had profound consequences. One day he returned from a hunting expedition utterly exhausted and famished. He felt as if he were on the verge of death from hunger. At that moment, Jacob was cooking a stew, likely a thick, reddish lentil soup. The aroma must have been overwhelmingly enticing to the starving Esau. He demanded of Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew." Jacob, ever the opportunist, saw a chance to gain something of immense value. He offered Esau the stew, but only in exchange for his birthright, the special honor and inheritance due to the firstborn son. Esau, caring little for future privileges when faced with immediate discomfort, rashly agreed. "Look, I am about to die," he declared. "What good is the birthright to me?" He swore an oath, despising his birthright and trading it for a simple meal. Years later, Isaac had grown very old and his eyesight had failed him almost completely. Believing his life was drawing to a close, he decided it was time to bestow the formal patriarchal blessing upon Esau, his firstborn. This blessing was not merely a father's good wishes, it was a powerful, divinely backed pronouncement that would shape Esau's future, promising prosperity and dominion. Isaac called Esau to him and instructed him to take his hunting gear, go out to the field, and hunt some wild game. Esau was then to prepare a savory dish, the kind Isaac loved, so that Isaac could eat and then give him his soul's blessing before he died. This was intended as a solemn, sacred transaction between father and chosen son. Rebekah, however, overheard Isaac's instructions to Esau. Her partiality towards Jacob, perhaps strengthened by her memory of the prophecy that the older would serve the younger, immediately spurred her into action. She quickly formulated a plan to divert the blessing to Jacob. She told Jacob to go to the flock and bring her 2 choice young goats. She would then prepare a delicious meal from them, just the way Isaac liked it. Jacob was to wear Esau's best clothes and cover his smooth hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. This disguise would help him impersonate his hairy brother Esau when he went before their blind father. Jacob was apprehensive, fearing that his father might discover the deceit and curse him instead, but Rebekah was resolute, even offering to take any resulting curse upon herself. Reluctantly, Jacob complied with his mother's elaborate scheme. Dressed in Esau's clothes, with goat skins on his hands and neck, he brought the prepared food to Isaac. The aged patriarch was puzzled. The voice sounded like Jacob's, yet the hands, when he touched them, felt hairy like Esau's. Isaac also questioned how Esau could have found and prepared the game so quickly. Despite his lingering doubts, Isaac was ultimately deceived by the touch and the familiar taste of the food. He ate the meal and then proceeded to bestow upon Jacob the powerful blessing intended for Esau. This blessing conveyed promises of God's dew from heaven, the earth's richness, abundant grain and new wine, dominion over peoples and, significantly, authority over his own brothers. No sooner had Jacob left Isaac's presence with the stolen blessing than Esau returned from his successful hunt. He prepared the savory meal his father had requested and brought it to him, anticipating the precious blessing. It was then that the full extent of Jacob's deception was revealed. When Esau learned that Jacob had come deceitfully and taken his blessing, he let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry. His heart was shattered. Isaac, also distressed, confirmed that the blessing given to Jacob was irrevocable. Esau wept and pleaded for at least some blessing from his father. He received a lesser blessing, one that spoke of a life away from the earth's richness and living by the sword. Esau's grief quickly turned to a simmering rage against Jacob. He harbored a grudge and planned to kill his brother once their father Isaac had passed away. Rebekah learned of Esau's murderous intent, and fearing for Jacob's life, urged him to flee to her brother Laban in Haran, far away, until Esau's fury subsided. Jacob's journey to Haran was one of exile and uncertainty. As he fled his family home, he stopped one evening at a place called Luz to rest for the night, using a simple stone as a pillow. There, under the open sky, he had a profound and transformative dream. He saw a magnificent stairway or ladder set up on the earth, with its top reaching up into heaven. Angels of God were ascending and descending on this ladder, connecting the earthly realm with the divine. Above the ladder stood the Lord God himself. God spoke to Jacob, reaffirming the covenant he had made with Abraham and Isaac. He promised Jacob the land on which he was lying, a multitude of descendants who would spread across the earth, and his constant presence and protection until all his promises were fulfilled. Jacob awoke from the dream with a sense of awe and reverence, recognizing that God was truly in that place. He consecrated the stone and named the place Bethel, meaning house of God, vowing to serve the Lord if he would indeed be with him. Upon arriving in Haran, the land of his mother's kin, Jacob's life took another dramatic turn. At a well outside the city, he encountered shepherds and then Rachel, the younger daughter of Laban, who was coming to water her father's sheep. Jacob was immediately smitten by Rachel's beauty and fell deeply in love with her. Laban, his uncle, welcomed him into his household. Jacob, eager to marry Rachel, offered to work for Laban for 7 years as a bride price. His love for Rachel was so great that these 7 years seemed to him but a few days. However, Laban proved to be a deceptive taskmaster. When the 7 years were completed, Laban tricked Jacob by substituting his older, less favored daughter, Leah, for Rachel during the wedding night, exploiting local customs and the bridal veil. Jacob was outraged by Laban's deceit, but Laban justified his actions by stating it was not customary to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older. He then offered Rachel to Jacob as well, but only in exchange for another 7 years of service. Jacob agreed, and after completing Leah's bridal week, he also married Rachel. Thus, Jacob found himself with 2 wives, though his love for Rachel remained paramount. During his 2 decades in Haran, Jacob became the father of a large family. Leah was very fertile and bore him 6 sons and a daughter, while Rachel, after a period of barrenness, eventually gave birth to Joseph and later Benjamin. Despite Laban repeatedly changing his wages and trying to exploit him, Jacob, through his diligence and God's blessing, prospered greatly, amassing significant flocks of sheep and goats. His time in Haran was a period of hard labor, family growth, and learning to navigate complex relationships. After 20 challenging years in Haran, where Jacob had served Laban and built his own family and fortune, God commanded him to return to Canaan, the land of his ancestors. This divine instruction filled Jacob with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The primary source of his anxiety was the unresolved conflict with his brother, Esau. The memory of Esau's vow to kill him, made 2 decades earlier, still haunted Jacob. He was deeply uncertain about how Esau would react to his return, especially after the deceptions surrounding the birthright and the blessing. The journey back was therefore fraught with emotional tension. Jacob gathered his wives, his 11 sons at that time, his daughter Dinah, and all his substantial possessions, and began the long trek back to his homeland, a man weighed down by his past yet hopeful for the future. As Jacob and his large caravan drew nearer to Canaan, specifically to the region of Seir where Esau lived, his fear intensified. He decided to send messengers ahead with a message of peace and humility, hoping to gauge Esau's disposition and find favor in his sight. The messengers returned with the ominous news that Esau was already on his way to meet Jacob, accompanied by a formidable force of 400 men. This news terrified Jacob, as such a large retinue suggested possible hostility rather than a friendly welcome. In his distress, Jacob took several strategic actions. He divided his entire camp, his family, servants, and livestock, into 2 separate groups, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might have a chance to escape. He also carefully selected a lavish gift of hundreds of animals, goats, ewes, rams, camels, cows, bulls, and donkeys, and sent them ahead in successive waves, hoping to appease Esau's potential anger. Alongside these practical preparations, Jacob turned to God in fervent prayer, confessing his unworthiness and pleading for deliverance from his brother. The night before the anticipated encounter with Esau, Jacob arranged for his family and all his possessions to cross the Jabbok River ford, while he himself remained behind, alone. In that solitude, a mysterious man appeared and began to wrestle with him. Their struggle was intense and lasted throughout the entire night until the break of dawn. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he struck Jacob's hip socket, dislocating it. Even in his injury, Jacob clung to the man, refusing to let him go unless he received a blessing. The man then asked Jacob his name and declared, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob, realizing the divine nature of his opponent, named the place Peniel, meaning face of God, for he said, "I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." This profound encounter left Jacob physically wounded but spiritually transformed. The following morning, Jacob, now also named Israel, saw Esau approaching with his 400 men. Limping from his injury yet resolute, Jacob went ahead of his family, bowing down to the ground 7 times as he neared his brother, a sign of deep humility and respect. To Jacob's immense relief and astonishment, Esau's reaction was not one of vengeance. Instead, Esau ran to meet him, embraced him warmly, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. Both brothers wept, a powerful and emotional release after 2 decades of estrangement and bitterness. Jacob humbly insisted that Esau accept his generous gift, which Esau eventually did as a sign of goodwill. They spoke, and though Esau invited Jacob to travel with him, Jacob wisely suggested they proceed at different paces. They parted ways amicably, Esau returning to his domain in Seir, and Jacob continuing his journey into Canaan, a man profoundly changed, reconciled with his past, and ready to claim his destiny.